The worst German military operation of the Second World War produced the best rifle the war ever saw. When Allied forces captured the first examples, they didn't study it, they copied it. The design's DNA is still present in weapons manufactured today, but that rifle only existed because of what happened on April 25, 1941. That date, Hitler signed the order for Operation Mercury, the first battle in military history where airborne forces served as the primary invasion element, not a supporting element, the main strike force. 22,000 German paratroopers committed to a single objective, the Greek island of Crete. Why attack with 22,000 against 42,000? Because German air superiority over the eastern Mediterranean was total. And because Hitler's order wasn't a proposal, it was a directive. The calculation was that air dominance cancels numerical deficit. That calculation was wrong. Defending Crete, British, Australian, New Zealand, and Greek units, 42,000 troops. The numerical ratio stood at 1 attacker for every 1.9 defenders. Military doctrine of the period required a minimum 3-to-1 advantage for a successful assault against prepared positions. The Germans launched with less than half that margin, but the numbers were only one layer of the problem. At Bletchley Park, a British codebreaker intercepted the German signal traffic and decrypted the Enigma order for Mercury. Not a fragment, the full operational plan. Drop zones, timing, unit assignments. A complete copy of the German attack landed on the headquarters table in Crete before the operation launched. Staff officers marked the map. The mountain plateaus targeted for the drops were already covered by New Zealand and Australian rifle positions waiting in those exact coordinates. From the cockpit of a Junkers Ju-52 at operational altitude, Crete looked like a fortified spine. Rocky ridgelines running the length of the island, a handful of flat coastal valleys barely visible below, and every single one already designated on German maps as a primary drop zone. The entire airborne armada was committed to those same narrow corridors, predictable to every pilot in the formation, predictable to every defender on the ground. 2 structural failures locked in before a single aircraft took off. German intelligence had no indication that Enigma was compromised. Their command had no read on the actual defensive density waiting at those drop zones. On the morning of May 20, 1941, the British staff in Crete held intercepts identifying which valley each German regiment would target, which airfield they intended to seize, and in what sequence the follow-on forces would land. The paratroopers didn't know any of that. 22,000 German paratroopers had orders to jump over Crete, but the harness system binding them to their parachutes was nothing like the Allied one. A single attachment point between the shoulder blades, all suspension lines converging into one dorsal node. That structural difference, a few centimeters on the back of a harness, made a feet-first exit mechanically untenable. With all lines feeding into one point, a feet-first jump produced a predictable result. The canopy shock flipped the man inverted, legs tangled in the rigging lines. A feet-first jumper became a problem before he reached the ground. The solution was the pike jump. Arms outstretched, head leading, exit head first. The body aligned with the single attachment point. The canopy opened clean. Why didn't the Germans simply copy the Allied 2-riser system? Because the single dorsal point gave one critical performance advantage. Full canopy deployment within 30 meters of aircraft exit, 2 to 3 seconds fully inflated. That made minimum jump altitudes of 75 meters operationally viable, roughly the height of a 20-story building. Allied paratroopers required between 150 and 300 meters of altitude. In the air, 2 to 4 times longer. Under fire for every second of it. The trade-off was total. The German paratrooper could not steer his canopy during descent. No input, no correction. And the pike jump itself left no room for a long weapon on the body. Arms out, head forward. No space for a rifle. An Allied paratrooper stepped out feet first, descended upright, and landed with his carbine ready. A German paratrooper executed the pike jump, rolled forward on impact. The prescribed landing technique to absorb the shock of an uncontrolled descent, and came up with a pistol, a knife, and a few grenades. Same drop zone, same second. Two entirely different soldiers. When a German paratrooper pushed himself out of the Ju-52, arms forward, head leading, his rifle had already stayed on board. The pike jump reduced time under fire. It created a different problem entirely. A German paratrooper left the Ju-52 carrying a pistol, a few grenades, and a knife. No rifle, no machine gun, nothing long, nothing heavy. Whatever couldn't be worn on a belt stayed on the aircraft. The Wehrmacht's answer was the container system. Each container carried its own parachute. The smaller type held approximately 90 kilograms of equipment. The larger type, up to 680. Both included wheels for field transport. No vehicle required. These containers didn't ride inside the aircraft. They hung from bomb racks on the underside of the Ju-52. The same hardpoints used for actual ordnance. The same release signal from the crew. Cylindrical, gray, stenciled with unit identification codes. From a distance, indistinguishable from a bomb load. The only difference, a compact white parachute folded into the top of each casing. Release was synchronized with the jump. Paratroopers out the door, containers off the racks, both descending toward the same drop zone at the same moment. In theory, on the morning of May 20th, 1941, Ju-52s crossed into Cretan airspace. Each large container on those racks held 680 kilograms of weapons, ammunition, and equipment, landing separately from the men who needed it at a point on the ground no one controlled. 42,000 Allied soldiers were waiting. They had the time, the drop zones, and the German wave schedule. Ultra intercepts had given them the complete operational order. The Ju-52s crossed the Cretan coastline at 75 meters on May 20th, 1941, flying into a prepared defense. Anti-aircraft batteries were already tracking before the first Fallschirmjäger cleared the door. Shells punched through fuselage aluminum. Several transports went down with their sticks still aboard. The men who survived the approach jumped into fire from below. Why didn't German command halt the operation after the first wave took catastrophic losses? Because by midday on the 20th, the paratroopers were already on the ground. The only path forward ran through the containers, and in most sectors, enemy soldiers had already reached them first. A Ju-52 released its container as the stick jumped. The cylinder's parachute deployed. Wind pushed it sideways. It drifted 200, 300, 400 meters from the landing zone. A New Zealand soldier was already running toward it. The German paratrooper was still clearing his chute lines. Anti-aircraft bursts cracked above the drop zones. Parachute canopies popped open in sequence. Then, a different kind of silence. In the fields and olive groves where paratroopers stood up alive, 300 meters from the nearest container with their rifles inside it. Some containers hung in trees. Others landed in defended positions before any German soldier could reach them. Several units ceased to exist in the first minutes of the operation. Not repulsed, destroyed. Men carrying pistols and grenades against riflemen with prepared fields of fire. The afternoon wave flew the same corridors, same doctrine, same containers. In some sectors, the results were worse. Paratroopers conducted the entire engagement on pistol ammunition against infantry that had had days to entrench and zero reason to retreat. Then Cretan civilians joined the defense. They attacked paratroopers with clubs, axes, and farm tools. Men who had survived the anti-aircraft fire, the drop, and initial contact died in the olive groves to agricultural implements. More than 4,000 German paratroopers killed, more than 200 aircraft destroyed. That death toll exceeded the combined Fallschirmjäger losses from every previous German airborne operation. Norway in April 1940, the Netherlands and Belgium in May 1940, all of them combined. Crete alone cost more. The Fallschirmjäger never jumped in force again. That was the Wehrmacht's production answer to infantry warfare. Assembly lines at Mauser's Oberndorf facility and across occupied Europe ran without stopping. Wooden stocks, bolt assemblies, receiver forgings, moving through in sequence, packaged, distributed, issued to every formation on every front. 14 million. Germany's total male conscription age population in 1939 stood at roughly 12.5 million. The army built more rifles than it had men of fighting age. Why did the Fallschirmjäger, Luftwaffe elite, jump with the same weapon as a regular infantryman? Because the army controlled weapons procurement, not the Luftwaffe. The German infantry squad ran on machine guns. MG-34 first, then MG-42. That was the primary fire source. Riflemen carrying Kar-98K screened the gun team, advanced under its suppression arc, held ground between bursts. The bolt-action rifle wasn't the squad's main weapon, it was filler. Other weapons existed, but the scale was different. Just over 1 million MP-40 submachine guns entered service. Around 400,000 STG-44 assault rifles. A comparable number of Gewehr-43 semi-automatic rifles. Against 14 million Kar-98K bolt-action carbines. 14 million against 400,000. That disproportion explains why units in prolonged contact stripped rifles from their own dead. No alternative existed at the supply level. A Fallschirmjäger on the Ju-52's jump deck cinched his Kar-98K flat against his chest with a retention strap, wooden stock pressed tight against his uniform. The rifle was not designed for the aircraft exit. It was not designed for landing without cover. It was designed for a different war. The Fallschirmjäger answered to the Luftwaffe. Their weapons came from army procurement. Army doctrine was written for the infantry division, not for men exiting an aircraft at 70 meters above a defended drop zone. After Crete, the requirement changed. One weapon, jump portable, capable of automatic fire and semi-automatic accuracy. No separate container drifting 300 meters into an olive grove. 14 million Kar-98K rifles. Every one fired from a closed bolt, and cooled too slowly for what the Fallschirmjäger needed. Rheinmetall's engineers started with a contradiction that no production weapon had formally resolved. Open bolt. The bolt assembly sits rearward, spring compressed, chamber empty. Between shots, air moves through the receiver. The barrel cools. A round left in a hot chamber long enough will ignite on its own. Cook-off. And open bolt operation eliminates that risk during sustained fire. But press the trigger on an open bolt weapon, and a heavy metal block slams forward before the round ignites. The rifle moves before the bullet leaves. Accurate single shots become difficult. Can you fire precise singles and still run sustained automatic fire without burning out the barrel? German engineers solved it with one selector. No other production weapon had done this. Closed bolt inverts the problem. The round already sits in the chamber. The bolt is already locked. Pull the trigger, only the firing pin moves. Nothing else shifts. The shot breaks clean. But run a closed bolt weapon on automatic for any sustained period, and heat accumulates in the chamber. The same chamber where the next round is already waiting. The FG42 held both states. The gas-operated rotating bolt mechanism traced directly to the Lewis light machine gun, a design from 1911, proven across 4 years of the First World War. 30 years between the Lewis and the FG42 prototype. Rheinmetall engineers adapted the same core principle. Propellant gas from each fired cartridge cycled a piston, rotating and unlocking the bolt. Reliable under field conditions. Mechanically compact. The system that functioned in flooded trenches in 1915 still functioned inside a paratrooper's rifle in 1942. The chambering was 7.92 by 57 mm Mauser. Full-power rifle ammunition. The same round the Kar-98K fired, the same round the MG-34 and MG-42 consumed by the belt. Not an intermediate cartridge. Not a reduced charge. Maximum kinetic energy. In a weapon light enough to jump from a Junkers Ju-52 with. In automatic mode, the bolt sits open, spring-loaded at the rear of the receiver, chamber empty. Trigger press. The block drives forward, strips a cartridge from the horizontally mounted side magazine, chambers it, fires. A dull metallic thud fills the receiver as that mass slams home. You hear the bolt moving before the shot breaks. In semi-automatic, The round is already chambered, the bolt already locked. A dry, sharp click as the firing pin drops. Nothing else moves. The rifle stays exactly where the sights were. One selector lever, one movement between those two states. No production weapon before the FG42 combined both firing modes. No production weapon after it did either. The dual bolt mechanism added mechanical complexity that generated reliability failures under extended field conditions, and no manufacturer who studied the design accepted it at scale. Eierlegende Wollmilchsau. German designers gave the specification a name before they drew a single blueprint. Egg-laying wool-milk pig, a German idiom for an impossible demand. One object expected to fulfill completely different functions all at once, perfectly. That was the requirement. Replace a standard service rifle, replace a light machine gun, fit inside a package under 1 meter. The designers called it impossible. Then they built it. Why didn't the German army develop FG42? Because the Wehrmacht and the Luftwaffe ran entirely separate weapons programs, separate budgets, and shared institutional hostility. Göring's paratroopers fell under Luftwaffe command. The army had no mandate to arm them, and no interest in doing so. Hermann Göring, second most powerful man in Nazi Germany, issued the development order himself. Outside the standard army procurement chain, directly. His Fallschirmjäger had taken catastrophic losses at Crete in May 1941. Nearly 6,000 German paratroopers killed or wounded in a single operation. Hitler reviewed the after-action reports and prohibited all further large-scale airborne operations. Göring reviewed the same reports. He drew a different conclusion. His men had fought with weapons designed for someone else. That had to change. The political process around the project was standard wartime dysfunction, design competitions, bureaucratic resistance, institutional interference from the army. Göring's personal order cut through it. His authority sat entirely outside the army's procurement structure. Without that single direct line, FG42 ends up in the same archive as dozens of other canceled German wartime programs. Unnamed, unfunded, forgotten. The finished weapon received the designation Fallschirmjäger Gewehr 42. Göring signed the development order. The program moved forward. Clearance came from Göring's desk. The engineering constraints did not bend to meet it. Engineers faced a specification that conflicted at almost every point. Total length, no more than 1 meter. Barrel length, long enough to stabilize the 7.92 Mauser round at combat range. Both requirements in the same weapon. The straight stock addressed the first structural problem. On standard rifles of the era, the stock dropped below the receiver. The bore axis sat above the shoulder contact point. Recoil pushed upward. The muzzle climbed. Manageable on single fire, uncontrollable on full automatic. FG42 changed the geometry entirely. Barrel, receiver, bolt group, stock. One straight line from muzzle to shoulder. Recoil traveled directly backward, no upward vector. Muzzle climb dropped sharply. The sights required elevation to compensate, but the weapon held its aim during sustained automatic fire. The cartridge made this critical. The 7.92 Mauser round, the same ammunition that fed the Kar-98K, carried substantial energy. The FG42 cycled it at 900 rounds per minute. 20 rounds, 1.5 seconds of continuous fire. The MG42's standard 50-round belt, at the same rate, lasted 3.3 seconds, more than double. The FG42 emptied its magazine before the MG42 reached the halfway point. The magazine position solved the length problem. 1 meter total. Barrel, 20 inches, roughly 50 centimeters. Complete weapon, 37 inches, 94 centimeters. That left almost nothing for the bolt to travel rearward during the firing cycle. Mount the magazine horizontally, left side of the receiver. The magazine protruded left, unfamiliar to any shooter trained on standard rifle geometry. But the space below and behind the receiver cleared entirely. The bolt traveled back into the buttstock on firing. The length limit held. The barrel stayed at full length, 50 centimeters of barrel, inside 94 centimeters of weapon, an efficient ratio by any contemporary standard. Later production models dropped the cyclic rate to approximately 750 rounds per minute. The initial FG42 had fired faster than the design could reliably sustain. A full magazine tilted at left. Designers recorded the weight shift and moved on. The next decision sat at the pistol grip. Early FG42s carried the grip angled at 45 degrees. Not an aesthetic decision. That angle matched the geometry of parachute harness straps, calculated so the rifle wouldn't snag during a jump and drag the trooper sideways. When exactly did Germany stop launching airborne operations? The FG42's grip angle answers that more precisely than any document. Later production models shifted to a near vertical grip. By that stage, Fallschirmjäger fought exclusively on the ground. Jump geometry had become irrelevant. The grip changed. Under the barrel, a folding bipod. Designed for prone fire, light machine gun capability without a second weapon. Soldiers rejected it quickly. No locking mechanism. Hold the rifle too loosely against the shoulder and the bipod folded back mid-burst. Support gone. Also under the barrel, a spike bayonet, folded flat. One-handed deployment. No separate sheath to carry. At the muzzle, a brake that redirected propellant gases sideways and rearward. Recoil dropped. Full auto became controllable. Soldiers standing adjacent heard the FG42 differently than a KAR-98K. Sharper report, with a hard lateral pressure wave at ear level. The muzzle flash extended further than standard muzzle blast. Effective for suppression. A direct liability for concealment. Just over 9 pounds. For full auto fire, semi-auto precision, folding bipod, integral bayonet, and optic mounting capacity. Operation Ica, September 1943. 90 paratroopers, the newest rifle in the German inventory. 0 shots fired. The Italian Carabinieri surrendered before the FG42 was used. Monte Cassino, February through May 1944. Same division, same rifles. 4 Allied assaults, approximately 55,000 casualties. Gran Sasso, Central Italy. DFS 230 gliders scraped across jagged limestone at 2,200 meters elevation. 90 Fallschirmjäger moved immediately on landing, straight to the Hotel Campo Imperatore, where Benito Mussolini was held under Carabinieri guard. The guards had no approach routes, no reinforcements, and no warning. Why did the Italian Carabinieri surrender without firing a single round? 90 armed paratroopers materializing from gliders on a fortified mountain plateau left no tactical options. The FG42 made its operational debut without a single trigger pull. The next test was different. January 1944. The 1st Fallschirmjäger Division held Monte Cassino, a 6th century Benedictine monastery commanding every road and valley approach in central Italy. Allied forces called them the Green Devils. The most experienced parachute division in Germany's entire order of battle. They occupied the rubble after Allied bombers leveled the monastery in February, placed firing positions inside broken stone walls, and held. Why did Fallschirmjäger choose semi-auto over full auto fire? 20 rounds per magazine. Just over 4 kilograms of rifle. On full auto, the muzzle departed the target zone after the 3rd or 4th round. Semi-auto kept each shot placed. A paratrooper braced inside a collapsed stone arch, muzzle resting on broken masonry. Selector pressed to semi. He tracked movement across the white limestone rubble below and pressed the trigger once. 1 round. He shifted position before the smoke cleared. The muzzle flash, sharp and visible against pale stone, marked his location for less than a second. 4 Allied offensives struck that hilltop between January and May 1944. British, American, New Zealand, Indian, and Polish formations attacked the same fixed coordinates. Total Allied casualties across all 4 battles reached approximately 55,000, a figure exceeding all American losses in the Pacific Theater during 1942. The first Fallschirmjäger held each position, fired controlled semi-auto from inside the monastery ruins, rotated between prepared stone firing points after each round, and turned back 4 consecutive Allied assaults at the same coordinates. The Green Devils, who held the Casino defensive line through the winter of 1944, redeployed to France that June. Their FG42s traveled with them. Normandy was different terrain. Bocage, dense hedgerows, sunken lanes, stone walls, engagements compressed to distances under 100 meters. Fallschirmjäger units defending the Norman countryside carried more of these rifles than anywhere else in the entire war. When Allied soldiers overran the first positions, they recovered the weapons and sent them up the intelligence chain immediately. Why did Allied analysts conclude FG42 existed in large numbers? Normandy held more of them than any other operational area in the entire war, but even that peak concentration was a small number of weapons spread across a wide front. The analysts measured battlefield impact. They did not measure inventory. One soldier pulled a captured rifle from a hedgerow position. The magazine fed horizontally from the left side of the receiver. No Allied design used this configuration. No recognition manual covered it. The weapon moved to Rear Area Technical Intelligence, marked urgent. Initial assessment: Germany had developed and fielded a new standard-issue rifle in significant quantity. The assessment was wrong. What made FG42 impossible to scale? 3 independent failures. The receiver required precision machining that standard German rifle production lines could not sustain at wartime speed. Allied bombing had severed the specialized steel supply networks those components demanded. And FG42 production fell under Luftwaffe administrative authority, not Army allocation, a jurisdictional division that permanently capped the production ceiling. Any single factor blocked mass production. All 3 ran simultaneously. German industry produced just over 7,000 FG42s across the entire war. Germany produced approximately 14 million Kar 98K rifles in the same period. 1 to 2,000. That ratio. The STG-44, entering production in the same years, reached approximately 450,000 units, 64 times the FG-42's total output. The FG-42 cost more per unit than either rifle to manufacture. Distribution reflected the numbers directly. The weapon moved only to first-tier Fallschirmjäger formations. Standard infantry never received an allocation. Secondary paratroop units never received one. Officers recorded FG-42 presence on unit inventories as a direct classification signal. The rifle documented elite assignment more precisely than any formal designation. A production failure became a status mechanism. Scarcity converted into institutional rank. The German Armaments Ministry never reclassified FG-42 above supplementary production priority. The rifle entered manufacture in that category and remained there through the final assembly run in 1945. That production ceiling meant nothing in a Junkers 52 cockpit at midnight. 3 years before this blizzard, the same Fallschirmjäger Corps had seized Mussolini at Gran Sasso in 18 minutes and held the Monte Cassino Heights through 4 Allied ground assaults. By December 1944, Germany was mounting its last parachute operation of the war, and nearly every component had already failed before a single man jumped. The operation was called Stosur. Approximately 1,200 Fallschirmjäger, roughly 100 Ju-52 transports. One objective: drop behind American lines in the Ardennes, seize a critical road junction, hold it for 24 hours, then wait for the Panzer column to punch through and link up. How many of those 100 aircraft actually reached the correct drop zone? 10. The remaining aircraft released their loads into the wrong coordinates. 250 paratroopers came down 50 miles from the objective, in the dark, in a snowstorm, in terrain they had never reconnoitered. That was not the first link in the failure chain. Only 20% of the 1,200 men carried qualification to jump with their personal weapons. The FG42 was designed specifically to solve that problem. A rifle the paratrooper could take through the jump itself, no drop containers required. By December 1944, 80% of the Stasser force still depended on separately released weapons containers to arm themselves after landing. Why couldn't 80% qualify? Late war replacement cycles had collapsed the Fallschirmjäger training pipeline. Experienced instructors were gone. New drafts cycled through abbreviated programs. The full weapons jump qualification took time the corps no longer had. They boarded the transports with the sequence unfinished. The drop went off just after midnight on December 17, 1944. Young pilots, most without a single combat sortie in their records, flew the FG42s into a powerful snowstorm. The formation broke in the wind and cloud. Most aircraft delivered their men far outside the designated zone. 10% of the entire force sustained casualties on landing. Not from enemy fire, from impact with frozen ground. The survivors filtered through the forest through the rest of the night. By morning, approximately 300 men had assembled, roughly a quarter of the original 1,200. Barely enough ammunition for a sustained fight. The weapons containers the remaining 80% needed lay scattered across 50 miles of dark forest and frozen fields. Nobody found them. The Panzer Column never arrived. It stalled against American resistance before the breakthrough point and stopped. 300 frostbitten men waited in the Ardennes forest through Christmas week with no resupply, no relief, and no orders that changed anything. Christmas Eve, 1944, they sent a surrender note. By spring 1945, Allied technical teams worked through captured German armories. FG42s went straight to the analysis bench. Each component documented, each mechanism stripped and measured. What exactly did they extract from the FG42 design? The gas-operated system, the receiver layout, the rotating bolt configuration. None of it existed in any Allied service rifle at that point. American engineers took a captured FG42 and reinforced the receiver. Then they grafted the belt feed top cover and feed mechanism from a captured MG42. 2 German weapons, 1 American designation. The T-44 prototype. Why call it a hybrid? The FG42 receiver supplied the operating system. The MG42 belt feed provided sustained fire capacity. Together they formed something neither weapon could achieve alone. The T-44 underwent further refinement and became the M60 machine gun. The U.S. Army adopted it in 1957. It served Korea, Vietnam, and continued through the 1990s. More than 172,000 units built, 24 times the entire FG42 production run of the Second World War. The FG42 itself stopped there. Germany lost. Production ended. Fewer than 200 documented FG42s survive worldwide. In 2023, a Type 1 sold at auction for $456,000. Type 2 variants clear $300,000. At Guns of Decatur in Texas, one trigger pull costs $5,000.